Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. Now this was directed once again by Chad Stahelski and stars Keanu Reeves, Halle Berry, Ian McShane, Asia Kate Dillon and Mark Dacascos. And this ultimately takes place straight after the second film. He's on the run, he has a bounty on his head, he's been excommunicado from the Continental and its resources. And ultimately, the bounty that was put on his head in number 2, which was 7 million, has been doubled in this one to 14 million. And it has gone international. The film begins straight after his interaction with Ian McShane's character Winston. He's only got less than an hour to work out what he needs to do and get through it before he's ultimately chased down by these particular bounty hunters and people wanting the money and wanting him dead. And it really looks at what he does to accomplish his goals, the plan he has in place to work out what he needs to do and how he goes about doing this. And this all leads to quite an interesting and very entertaining film. I think this is quite a fitting ending to the trilogy, even though I've just heard that they may be making a fourth one, which I think is a bad decision. I think they should just leave this and then go on to do the Continental TV series. But I really liked this. I thought this was a great fitting ending. It was non-stop. Once the hour was up and everybody was after him, it was just non-stop. It was action after action. Just go, 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 go. There's a lot of great set pieces in this film, and the action is just amazing to watch. Some of it you have to watch to believe, and it's so brutal. Like, the violence in this is much more brutal than the first two films, where they were sort of stylized violence in a way. This is just brutal. People's heads didn't explode by shotguns. This involving knives, horses, and a variety of other things that he uses as weapons, such as a book and his belt. Each action sequence is bigger and better than the last, and it just is just full on. It's hard to really take it all in because there's so much happening at once and it's so fast, and you just get immersed in the action of the whole thing. All the acting once again is solid. Keanu Reeves is just proving what a great actor and martial artist he is, and the stunts he does is in the fight sequences he does. It's quite extraordinary for a man of 52 years of age to be doing the action sequences he does. It's mind-boggling. There's moments where he's fighting people on a horse, he's on a motorbike. He's just doing everything he can to survive. And no matter who he gets thrown at him or who comes after him, he takes them out. He seems angry. There's a brutality to his fighting and killing in this film than there were in the previous two. There's this sequence that takes place early in the film where he fights this really tall guy. He's at least 6 7 foot in a library, and he takes him out with a book. This is quite extraordinary to watch, to tell you the truth. All the other actors get good moments into it. I think Larry Fishburne does quite well. It's good to see him back in this sort of role again. I'd like to see more of him. I think he's an interesting character. We don't know a lot about him, but there's an interesting enough character there for us to follow. Ian McShane's really great. Lance Reddick actually shines a bit in this as the guy who's sort of the concierge at the Continental. You actually get to see him in action, him fighting, firing guns, fighting people. It's really interesting to watch, and I'm glad they expanded on his role quite a bit. I think Halle Berry's really solid. She has some really great action sequences, one in particular with her and her two dogs that the character has in the film. And just this sequence that takes place in Morocco is just extraordinary to watch. And ultimately, Wick and her fighting side by side and seeing them fight is just a marvel to watch. And the two dogs in this sequence are fantastic. They really expand the world, and we get many more characters and more circumstances that take place in the film. Like, we have Asia Kate Dillon, who I hadn't really seen before, and looking at her, she reminds me of, looks a lot like Elizabeth Debicki, but sounds like Anne Hathaway. It was quite an interesting thing to watch, and she's quite a unique looking person, and I think she gives such great gravity to the role she plays. She plays the adjudicator. So this is obviously part of the high table and the people who are in charge of all this sort of happening in the Continental and the world that these characters inhabit. And she's the adjudicator. She comes in and ultimately tells them what's what, and tells them there is going to be repercussions for what John Wick's done and repercussions towards the people who've helped him along the way. And I thought that was kind of an interesting element. They expanded, they went into a bit more about who the high table was and sort of how it began. We get other characters such as Angelica Houston's character, who's sort of a Russian gypsy sort of character, owns this theatre. And she and Wick have a past together. You don't quite know exactly what it is going in. But as they walk through this particular place, it's like we're walking through John Wick's memories in a way. And we really find out who he is and sort of where he came from. And I thought this sequence was really great, and they developed the character a bit more, and we have a bit more of understanding about him, and we care a bit more about him, I think, in a lot of ways. He goes on such a journey here, not only to, work out what he needs to do to survive this, taking out people, but there's sort of a spiritual element to it as well. He finds himself in the desert and he's seeking something, he's searching for someone. And that sort of plays a big part to the rest of the film. And I really like that. I love the imagery of John Wick in a suit out in the desert. I just thought that was great imagery, and it sort of looks fantastic on the big screen as well. Mark Dacascos is in this, who plays Zero. He's sort of like a samurai ninja sort of character. Ultimately, he's after John Wick as well due to the bounty that's on his head. He's an actor who's been around quite a while. He's done a lot of martial arts films. He was in, I think, The Crow, the TV series. And he's quite capable and has great ability fighting-wise. And to see him and Wick against each other is fantastic. And I really like the scenes that they had between each other. There's a real classic sort of martial arts feel to this particular film. There's a feel, especially towards the end of this particular fight sequence that takes place in this glass room. It really reminds me of Game of Death, where Bruce Lee's going level to level and has to fight different people, and that sort of felt reminiscent in this sort of film. It's a revenge film, but it's pushed to the extremes. The action and violence is quite extreme and brutal, like I said previous, and it just keeps going. It's a relentless movie. It reminds me of those ideas of Jason Bourne and movies like that, where the character just has to keep going and going and going and has to improvise along the way. And I really like that. He doesn't have his gun and his weapons that he usually has to take out particular bad guys. But as we've seen in the two previous films, he's a great improviser. He uses a pencil in one scene and a variety of other things that he uses to defend himself and take out these particular people after him. And this film is no exception. He has to improvise so much within the fight sequences. And there's this one particular sequence that takes place in sort of a museum sort of thing where there's a lot of knives and guns. And that scene is just phenomenal to watch. His use of knives in that particular sequence is just extraordinary. And he just keeps improvising, he keeps going, he comes up with different things, and he just keeps going. It's quite just fascinating to watch him trying to survive in such a violent world where everybody's against him and after him. What I've always liked about the John Wick character is he has what a lot of other characters within this film don't, a lot of the killers. He has pure will. He just wills himself to accomplish what he sets out to do, wills himself to kill people, wills himself to survive, and just keeps pushing no matter what happens. Sheer will it is that he uses to get through. In a lot of sequences he's tired and like exhausted, but he finds this energy from somewhere and he just keeps going. He will do anything that he needs to survive. And he will take that person out that attacks him in the most brutal way if he has to, or in the most simple, easy way to kill someone. And I really like that aspect to it. He's just such a fascinating character. And like I said, we get to learn a bit of the backstory and who he is as a person, and I like that. Each film, they've evolved the character. They've evolved the storylines. They've opened the scope and the size of the particular film. And this is no exception. This film looks at other continental places as well, one in Morocco, for example. And I like that we get to see more of this world and more of these characters, and that there are more continentals around the world. And I really like that. I think that was a great added idea, and they keep expanding the world. And I liked that. I loved a lot of elements to this film. I love the action sequences. I like the characters that appear. And I was entertained by it. And it is definitely on my top 10 of the year. I only have one little gripe, one little criticism, or one thing I didn't love was the ending, the end ending, like right at the end. I just felt that could have been handled a little differently. I'm not saying it was bad or the choices they made were wrong. I just felt it could have been handled differently. I felt I needed more of a conclusion. Going in, I thought it was just a trilogy, but like I said, I only recently found out today that there's talk of doing a fourth one, which I think is a really bad idea. But if they do that, I want to know who the high table are. I want to know who's involved in that, who has a seat at the table, and how all this world, continental and Assassin's world began. And that's what would be more interesting if they do a fourth. But like I said, the ending to this film, they could have made a different choice or ended it earlier or done something different with it. And I don't know how I feel about the ending. It's something I've been thinking about and has to sit with me after watching the movie last night, but I just don't know how I really feel about the ending. But I think in a way they needed to end it the way they did, because I don't know, it's a type of film that needs that sort of ending. There isn't quite closure in the whole thing, but I think that's the point purpose to it. It's not meant to be closure, because it's not. It's an action-based film. It's a revenge picture. It's a man fighting for survival. That it needed to end the way it did, I guess. Ian McShane's character Winston gets a bit more to do in this particular film as well. And I like the sequences between him and John Wick, and him and Lance Riddick's character, Sharon. It's kind of interesting to see these two mingle together. And this film has much more humour in it than the first two. There are humorous moments in the first two films and probably more in the second, but this has really humorous moments in it. And Mark Dacascos provides a lot of that humour, which I didn't quite expect from him, and he's quite funny. There's this big sequence and set piece towards the end of the film, a sort of gunfight, if you will, that's quite epic, and there's a lot of humour to be had in these particular sequences as well. I think the humour just adds another level to it. It takes sequences that usually would be taking themselves too seriously, and most action films talk, say something badass or whatever, where this sort of just throws a bit of humour in there to lighten up the circumstances that we as an audience find ourselves in. And I like that as well. I thought that was an interesting choice. Overall, it was an entertaining and fun film, and it's going on my top 10 of the year. Final verdict. Look, if you're a fan of the first two John Wick films, you'll really love this. If you like action and revenge pictures, if you like Keanu Reeves, if you just want to see a good, solid action film done well with interesting characters and interesting backstory of these particular characters and an ever-changing and evolving world, this is definitely the film for you. I'm going to give John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum 4.5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. It fits nicely within the two other films. Personally, I still think the second film's the best out of the trilogy, well, out of the three films we have so far anyway, because the first one was solid. There was nothing misused. It all had a purpose and made the way they wanted to. But the second one really opened up the world, which I really liked. I liked the story. I liked most of it was set in Rome. I liked that we got to see a different continental and a different group of people. I liked the villain. I liked everything that transpired in that particular sequel, and I really liked a lot of that movie, and I still think it's the most solid. This is really good as well, but I just think the second one's my favourite. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.